today on Ag News Daily.
That channel, that YouTube channel, playing a game called Farming Simulator, got over 1 million views, and then was able to take a little bit of that capital and start buying a little bit of farmland. I was like, well, this is kind of a unique start. I'm like, we could start documenting the journey of buying one piece of farmland, two pieces of farmland, and growing a crop.
Well, welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. Delaney Howell joined remotely today by Michelle Stangler. And Michelle, it is a busy time of year. We've got Farm Progress Show right around the corner, and then we've got harvest shortly thereafter. So how are things looking up in your neck of the woods?
Good. I know that we'll report on it later here in the show, is that crop might be a little low this year. But if we're looking at the corn silage season, that will be coming up. So here, especially in dairy country, a lot of tall corn and using the full stalk of corn. So that will be harvested depending where here shortly. But certainly cool to see how tall corn can be, especially when we talk about small stature corn for some states.
Mm-hmm. I've been seeing more and more of that pop up, actually. I don't remember, I was at recently and I was driving and I saw quite a bit of corn or short stature corn. So I thought that was super interesting. We're seeing more of that pop up here, and I'm sure that technology will continue to evolve, especially as we think about things like derechos and some of the impact that has to the corn and the stalk. But let's look at some weather. Speaking of that, heavy rains continue to target parts of the Midwest, especially through Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Nebraska, and that central Midwest region. A stalled weather pattern is pulling moisture north from the Gulf, which is fueling those repeated rounds of heavy rain that we've been seeing. Indiana has certainly taken the brunt of that, with some isolated locations getting up to 17 inches of rain, while 7 to 8 inches has been the more widespread norm from eastern Iowa through central Illinois and much of Indiana. But flooding is also a top concern, as flooded areas saw more heavy rainfall on Wednesday this week, adding to already saturated conditions across parts of those states. More showers, unfortunately, are coming through the weekend, with another system possible early to mid next week. And that rain's going to create some more wet conditions and issues for parts of the Midwest that certainly don't need rainfall. And I know the PNW, the plains, high plains areas, those areas could use rainfall. So I wish that we could send it their way. But temperatures will remain mild through the next week, with a few days potentially running below normal, which is nice if you are heading to a state fair this time of year.
Well, if we look at some crop conditions, the U.S. crop condition ratings mostly slipped over the past week as farmers saw a mix of weather from near ideal conditions in some areas to dryness and excessive moisture in others. The USDA's rating says 60% of the corn crop is good to excellent, down 1%, with 97% silking, 76% in the dough stage, 29% dented, and 4% mature. If we look at those soybeans, there are 61% good to excellent, USDA reports, also down 1%, with 96% blooming and 85% setting pods. Looking at winter wheat harvest, it's 96% complete, ahead of the 5-year average of 94%. Looking at spring wheat ratings, though, improved slightly, with 52% good to excellent, up 1%, while 41% is harvested compared with the 5-year average of 34%. If we look at the pasture and rangeland conditions, they moved lower, with 23% rated good to excellent and 48% rated poor to very poor. USDA's weekly crop progress and condition reports will continue through the end of November, and we'll continue to share that here on Ag News Daily. But we'll be back with today's news after this tip with Corteva Agriscience.
When we think about nitrogen losses in our soil and our environment, 30% of those losses occur as that product sits on top of the ground. 70% of total nitrogen loss occurs on in-ground. Well, when I'm thinking about fall, nothing's going on the ground. We're talking either knifing in anhydrous ammonia or knifing in liquid manure. That's what needs to be stabilized, because that's a heavy loss. Why that loss occurs? That fall application of nitrogen or manure is heavy with ammonia. Ammonia is a positively charged ion, and soil is negative. So it goes on stable. But there's this bacteria, nitrous ammonious bacteria, that breaks that bond, changes ammonia to nitrite and then to nitrate. We all hear of nitrates in the groundwater, nitrates in the rivers. You never hear ammonia in the water or the river because ammonia is stable. What we're trying to do is to stabilize that, keep it in the ammonium form all the way through the winter and well into early spring, when most of those losses can occur with the heavy rains in April and May. Stabilize in the fall, have more nitrogen for your crop in the summer. Well into early spring, when most of those losses can occur with the heavy rains in April and May. Stabilize in the fall, have more nitrogen for your crop in the summer.
Well, Michelle, the talk of the town has certainly been the start of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, and we were expecting to see some big yields, but with scouts out reporting that maybe wasn't the case in some key areas. Scouts were reporting lower ear counts and some gaps in corn stands across Illinois and Iowa. Illinois corn yield estimates came in at about 184 bushels per acre, which is the lowest since 2019, while Western Iowa's corn estimate ran below last year as well, closer to that 3-year average. Nebraska also fell short with a 163 just over bushel estimate, down nearly 9% from 2025 and almost 6% below the 5-year average. Scouts pointed to ear counts, tip back, and wind damage as crop development issues are limiting yield potential in those key states. Soybeans generally looked stronger, with Illinois scouts counting more than 1,400 pods in the 3x3 square, about 3% below 2025, but 3% above the 3-year average. Western Iowa's pod counts were below last year, but well above the 3-year average, and Nebraska's were about in line with where we see for the 3-year average. Scouts also reported relatively low disease and weed pressure in Nebraska and Iowa, although wind damage in Indiana could create some harvest challenges. And the remaining Iowa and Minnesota's we'll share in next week's show. We're recording just a little bit early here on this Thursday afternoon before final results are in, but I think the sentiment will likely continue across those two states as well.
Looking at some technology and talking about crop protection tools, a new digital platform, which is shared here in late July, could give farmers another tool to make fungicide timing decisions in corn and soybeans. Crop Voice Whole Farm is what it's called. It uses artificial intelligence to monitor environmental conditions and detect plant responses to infection. Interplant says its technology can identify specific gene activity and detect optical signals from plants weeks before farmers can see disease symptoms. It'll be interesting if this is the next step to artificial intelligence. Beginning in 2027, farmers will have year-round access to a live dashboard with field-by-field disease risk information throughout the growing season. The goal here is to help farmers identify when infections occur and to make more informed decisions about protecting that yield.
Well, Michelle, the global biopesticides market could nearly double by 2030 as growers and crop protection companies are responding to tighter pesticide regulations and demand for more sustainable production, according to a report released late last Friday. Michelle, that report projects that the market will grow from about $8.9 billion in 2025 to nearly double to about $17.5 billion by 2030, or about a 14.6 annual growth rate. Biological products are gaining ground as growers look to reduce pesticide residues, manage resistance, and complement integrated pest management programs. Seed treatments are expected to also be the fastest growing application of biologicals and biopesticides, while cereals and grains are projected to account for a significant share of demand as well. Advances in microbial products, biochemical ingredients, and formulations are improving product shelf life and field performance. And for U.S. growers, that growth could bring more biological crop protection options that work alongside conventional products in precision agriculture. It's interesting as we think about the adoption of that. A lot of times I've seen farmers will, adopt maybe 5 or 10% of their acres to using those products. So it'll be interesting to see not only the rate at which these products are coming to market, but also the adoption on the farm gate level at how quickly farmers are adopting these products on their acres.
Looking more into the specialty crop sector, rising labor, input, and regulatory costs are making it harder for U.S. fruit and vegetable growers to stay competitive. Since 2010, to give some data, U.S. fruit production has fallen 32%, while vegetable production has declined 10%. At the same time, fresh fruit and vegetable imports have each increased about 70%, helping fill seasonal gaps and provide consumers with year-round supplies. But larger import volumes during the U.S. harvest season can put additional price pressure on domestic growers, particularly for highly perishable crops that cannot be stored while waiting for better prices. The impact is showing up in markets including lettuce, cabbage, blueberries, strawberries, and tomatoes. The trend also raises broader concerns about food security as the U.S. becomes more dependent on foreign-grown produce. And the lettuce has certainly made the news in the last few weeks. We'll certainly be on the watch of what that means for specialty growers.
Yeah, we won't go into the details of the lettuce. Everyone knows what's going on there. The USDA trimmed its U.S. wheat production forecast by about 6 million bushels this month, tightening the balance sheet. And with no changes to export or other use forecasts, ending stocks are now projected at about 717 million bushels, down about 203 million from last year. USDA says this decline reflects a historically small U.S. wheat crop. But the U.S. is not alone in seeing their production fall. The USDA also cut its European Union wheat production forecast by about 1.8 million metric tons. Hot, dry weather across the EU during the wheat grain filling period reduced that yield potential this year. And the new estimate puts EU production about 11 million tons below last year. So that could be a potential market mover here for some of our wheat complex, but we'll be back with more news after this short break.
Farming comes with trade-offs. An extra pass means dinner in the cab. An early morning becomes a late night. Unnecessary restrictions turn into headaches. But when you make Enlist herbicides the foundation of your herbicide program, the trade-offs will be in your favor. Effective weed control that's ready to work when you are. Flexible tank mix options and neighbor-friendly applications, all without the need to jump through hoops. See what you'll gain with America's most trusted herbicide system protecting your Enlist E3 soybean fields at Enlist.com.
Well, field days are wrapping up and starting some of the bigger shows in the upcoming few weeks, including Husker Harvest Days. We'll debut a new Ag Tech Pavilion coming September 15th through the 17th in Grand Island, Nebraska, where that show is, giving farmers a closer look at emergent technology and the companies developing it. The pavilion, presented by Farm Progress in partnership with the Combine and the University of Nebraska, will cover precision agriculture, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, data management, connectivity, and equipment. Farmers can also take in daily 30-minute panels and expert presentations focused on practical technology applications, including autonomous equipment, AI, irrigation efficiency, robotics, return on investment, and drones for crop scouting and livestock management. The goal is to give producers a closer look at innovations they can put to work on their operations. Certainly, we'll hear some presentations at Farm Progress Show as well. Certainly a lot of different topics on that AI and precision technology that we can use throughout farms across the nation.
Well, Michelle, at the Iowa State Fair last week, I caught up with Mitchell Hora of Continuum Ag to get just a brief update on 45Z. Of course, he's keeping close tabs on that conversation as it continues to develop. So let's hear his quick take.
So the USDA finally wrote their rule at the end of June. So now we've got some guidance as to how the farmers can actually quantify their carbon intensity, how they can verify their data. And now we know that's mass balance, which means that your data and your crops stay together. So 45Z, your low carbon crop has to be delivered to the ethanol plant. So you have to have kind of some quasi traceability essentially. So book and claim is where we would have decoupled the data and the crop, but now the data and the crop stay together. But for farmers that have delivered or could deliver their crop to the ethanol plant or to a crusher, or if you're participating with an elevator who is selling to them, this is a huge deal. There's a couple ethanol plants that have started to roll out some programs, started to put out some premiums and stuff. And I do think that there'll be some money moving later this year. So this would be for your 2025 corn that's been utilized for biofuel in 2026. I do think that there'll be some money moving later this year. But we're still waiting for the Department of Energy, and we're still waiting for Treasury to finalize components of the rules on their side. So it's a little slow right now, but it looks good that those things will be done and things are going to be full speed ahead. 45Z is currently in law till 2029, and it's got good bipartisan support. So I'm not super worried about it going away because of the midterm elections or elections in the future. I think we'll be okay. But the midterm election actually is incentivizing this administration to get the rules done before the midterms. So that's part of the push to be able to actually get this thing done, get it across the finish line before November.
Well, Michelle, U.S. agricultural equipment sales slowed once again in July, with tractor sales down nearly 11% from a year ago and combine sales falling more than 5%, according to the latest report from the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. AEM says softer commodity prices, input costs, interest rates, and broader economic uncertainty are weighing on farmers' capital equipment purchases, much of the same sentiment that we've been hearing throughout this year. While equipment prices have risen, AEM says today's machinery also offers greater productivity, technology, and fuel efficiency compared to equipment from decades prior, and that's how a lot of them are maybe justifying or signaling that price increase. This slowdown is also putting pressure on manufacturers and local equipment dealers, however, which often rank among the largest employers in rural communities. AEM says managing equipment inventories is critical as dealers face interest costs on unsold machinery. Looking ahead, the group is pushing for policies that increase demand for farm products, including biofuels, year-round E15, free trade, and rural infrastructure.
Well, talking about trade, a lot of conversations with Canada this week. Canada, though, has temporarily avoided a 50% U.S. tariff this week after reaching a last-minute agreement with the President Trump and his administration just hours before the higher duties were set to take effect. President Donald Trump said Tuesday night he was pausing the tariffs for 3 days while the two countries finalized the agreement. The proposed tariffs would have affected about $20 billion in Canadian goods, adding another layer of uncertainty for businesses on both sides of the border. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the two countries have made substantial progress toward a trade deal, although more work remains. Trump also suggested the long-delayed Keystone XL pipeline could potentially be revived, but offered few details or confirmed whether it was tied to the tariff agreement. The 3-day reprieve gives farmers, ranchers, and other industry professionals more information as we continue to watch this here on Ag News Daily. Certainly, the USMCA trade agreement is something we're continuing to watch, and what trade will look like here in the upcoming few weeks.
Well, the U.S. pork industry is looking for a more coordinated approach to major swine health challenges, with researchers, funding organizations, and industry leaders meeting to identify research gaps and future priorities under the National Swine Health Strategy this month. The group highlighted opportunities to improve vaccines, diagnostics, and tools for diseases including PED and PRRS, while also focusing on practical ways to limit disease spread through stronger biosecurity, transportation, sanitation, and proven on-farm practices. For foreign and emerging diseases, participants emphasized better surveillance, traceability, and preparedness. The National Pork Board says coordinating research around producer-driven priorities could help turn research investments into practical tools that improve herd health and reduce disease risks.
Well, there was two big pieces of news, especially in the livestock packaging industry this week. Workers at Cargill's Fort Morgan, Colorado beef plant have approved a 5-year labor agreement this week, ending an 89-day lockout and clearing the way for the plant to resume processing. Employees are expected to begin returning August 24th, with processing set to restart the week of September 7th. The facility can process about 4,700 head of cattle per day. Livestock economist David Anderson with Texas A&M University says reopening the plant is good news for cattle producers because it adds another buyer to the market and increases competition for available cattle. However, Anderson says the reopening does not offset the recent closure that Delana will talk about here in a minute in Joslin, Illinois. That shutdown has concentrated more cattle processing capacity in the plains and could force producers in that Missouri, Kentucky, Illinois, and Indiana area to haul cattle farther to packing plants. He says longer transportation distances could increase costs and put downward pressure on regional prices for feeder cattle, calves, and fed cattle. Hargrell says it will take a phased approach to restart Fort Morgan, focusing on employee safety, food safety, and operational readiness.
Well, as you teased, Michelle, Tyson Foods is closing its Joslin, Illinois beef packing plant as tighter cattle supplies continue to reshape the packing industry, which was announced earlier this week. The shutdown will eliminate roughly 3,000 head of daily slaughter capacity and about 2,500 local jobs. Oklahoma State livestock economist Darrell Peel says Tyson is focusing on its 3 largest plants now in Dakota City, Nebraska, Holcomb, Kansas, and Amarillo, Texas. Tyson says it could sell its Pasco, Washington facility as well. Peel says the industry still has more processing capacity than the current cattle supply can support, meaning additional adjustments still remain very possible. For producers who relied on Joslin, the closure means finding other markets for their cattle, with many loads likely moving to Tyson's Dakota City plant. This could increase transportation costs and put additional pressure on regional cattle prices. Tyson says it could eventually restart a second shift in Amarillo, which would replace much of the slaughter capacity lost at Joslin and keep the company's overall processing volume relatively stable.
The National Grain and Feed Association is marking its 6th annual Harvest Safety Week this week, August 18th through the 22nd, with a focus on keeping farmers and agriculture workers safe during harvest this year. This year's theme, Safety First, Harvest Ready, highlights new resources covering grain storage piles, moving vehicles, extreme weather, and worker fatigue. The NGFA says the resources are designed to give farmers and agricultural workers practical safety information they can use during this busy harvest season. While this one runs for 1 week, the organization emphasized that safety needs to remain a year-round priority. The organization's safety resources are available online and can be shared with farmers, employees, customers, and suppliers. The goal is to strengthen safety awareness and encourage practices that help everyone make it home safely at the end of the day.
Well, Michelle, for this week's interview, I caught up with Grant Hilbert, a farmer here in the state of Iowa, and he talks about how he had an interesting path that led him to starting Hilbert Farms along with his brother. You can find Hilbert Farms on social media to follow along with their operation, but let's get into that interview now.
I'm catching up with Grant Hilbert at the Iowa State Fair this year at the Farmfluencers event at the fair. Grant, it's great to hear you speak on the Barn Talk podcast earlier. I'm excited to bring your story to the Ag News Daily Post as well. So thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here.
I love the story that you and your brother were sharing. It's very unique. You're first generation farmers. You didn't grow up on a farm, but you have a really cool and unorthodox way that you got onto the farm. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so it kind of starts in 2014, was a sophomore in high school, and got a little bit of vision to start creating YouTube videos. And a game called, I played a bunch of different games, a game called Farming Simulator took off and started getting, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 views per video. And from there, in 2016, I graduated high school. I was like, boy, we got a little bit of traction. We could really start going after this. And so I just posted a video every day for 4 years. And then that channel, that YouTube channel, playing a game called Farming Simulator, got over 1 million views. And then was able to take a little bit of that capital and start buying a little bit of farmland. I was like, well, this is kind of a unique start. I'm like, we could start documenting the journey of buying 1 piece of farmland, 2 pieces of farmland, and growing a crop, and literally going from nothing, where I didn't have any physical background experience of actual farming. And so kind of the key thing that hit me when I got started farming was, boy, I got out there, I bought a planter, I bought a tractor. How do I set this? Like, how do I do that? So I was calling neighbors first day of planting, trying to kind of figure out all that. And that's kind of where I am now. And so me and my brother, we farm about 500 acres in central Iowa. And we call it kind of weekend warrior, where we're farming on the weekends. And then weekdays, I'm working on the YouTube channel, or in 2020 started a software company where we create a mobile farming game called American Farming. So the map in the game is based out of central Iowa, very Iowa Midwest focused game.
That's quite the origin story. So just to make sure I got that right, you just started playing Farming Simulator randomly, and
Yes.
you decided to start a YouTube channel. And then that YouTube channel got to a point where you thought, hey, I could actually leverage this to buy a farm.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Was able to basically just take it and bought 3 different farms, not your flat black and square 80s in central Iowa, very rough with timbers, 5-acre patches, and kind of cleaned them up a little bit, and then got my start that way. So
That's awesome. I think that's really rewarding to hear because, you know, getting into agriculture and farming, like you said, is very capital intensive. And you and your brother have created this pathway that shows other young people who might be interested, hey, you can do things differently and still make it work. So talk to me a little bit about the software company too. You mentioned you have a farming video game, which on a side note, it's like, hey, mom and dad, you thought video games were bad for us. Here's a great example of how it can be helpful in your career, in your life.
For sure. Yeah. And one thing with mom and dad, my parents were very, from the start of YouTube, they're like, oh, that's a waste of time. You should be doing this. They weren't like that. And they were very like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, making a little bit of money just as you would as a high school kid. That's pretty cool. You should go after it. So very supportive there. But yeah, the game, it's called American Farming. We released it in November 2023. And then we've been building American Farming 2, just a sequel of it that's going to release here August 24th. And so basically you start on a 600 acre map, 600 acre farm. In American Farming 1, we basically made the map out of Grundy County, Iowa, so some of the best farmland in Iowa, and made it very realistic to Iowa. You could start with a very small farrow to finish hog farm, work your way up, or you could go with a giant grain farm. So like all sorts of options, and try to make it realistic to kind of Iowa there. And so it's turned out, had a lot of success. And then we got a bunch of brands licensed in there like Case H, New Holland, Agco, probably 20, 30 other brands in the game. So
honestly too, as you're describing that, Grant, I feel like there's probably a cool element for education in the classroom for kids, again, that don't have that background in farming. The game you're creating, it sounds like you're kind of giving them a way to simulate that before they were to take that on, that risk themselves.
Yeah, if you're playing the game and you start on like a small hog farm, you mentally have to think through the best ways to do stuff, because you got to apply your nitrogen, you got to apply your P and K. And then there's a synergy when you have both nitrogen and P and K connected together. We got hog manure, cattle manure on there, and then you got time the grain markets perfectly. One thing we don't have that we're going to add, because we had helicopters, we're going to add fungicide and stuff like that. So you got your different fungicide products you can spray. But if you're trying to look at it economically, like what decision should I make? What farmland should I purchase in game? How do I sell and market my crop? It's very much realistic to that. So if you got an 8, 10, 12-year-old kid playing, like, we're getting a little experience right away off the bat. So
that's really neat. And what has the audience been like on this? Because you assume, right, farm kids interested in farming, but you weren't a farm kid and you started playing games like this. So
yeah. I would say our average user is probably 15 to 18 years old, but we've got a lot of people that are 50, 60, 70 that play the game and love it because it gives that challenging economics experience. You got to think about your economics with it. And then we also have younger kids too, 8, 10, 12 years old, playing the game. So all sorts of ages.
So I know you and your brother are doing this stuff jointly, but you have a lot of irons in the fire to manage all of that. So how do you guys share responsibilities?
Yeah, so how it looks like is he runs all the media side. So when it comes to all the YouTube side, he's editing all the videos, because we have real life channels also, 2 individual real life channels that document the journey on the farm. He manages all that. And that's kind of his thing. He does a great job on it. I originally started on YouTube, and then he kind of got into it 2-3 years after. And I'm like, Spencer, you're more in depth on it. You do a way better job than me. You're more detailed. Your videos get more views. You need to be running this thing. I need to back away from this thing. And so I just kind of focus a little bit more on the software company, a little bit of the farming, the physical farming side, and then the virtual YouTube gaming channel that we have. So it's worked great. I said on the podcast up there, like, it can be kind of dangerous working with brothers, but if we get in a fight, it's hey, I'm mad at you for 20 minutes and totally forget about it. And that happens once or twice a year. So it's really, really a great relationship.
As you guys think about the future, you've got your new video game releasing. Do you have any other big dreams or goals or things you're working toward?
Honestly, nothing major right now. The number one thing is grow the software company, grow the mobile game, and maybe take it a step further way into the future. That's kind of number one vision. And then same with the farming operation. don't need to grow insanely quick. If we pick up a little bit of rented acres every once in a while, if we buy a little bit of own ground, that'd be great. But don't want to get crazy big to where it takes up all your time and you're really stressed out. I really enjoy the lifestyle of farming now. It's great. It gives a lot of time. It allows you to do other things, and but still at the same time, really look forward to planting that crop, harvesting it, spraying throughout the season, and love playing, I'll call it the game of farming with the weather stresses that come down, right? We got 10 inches of rain in July. It sucks. But when you look back at it all over your career, you'll be like, man, that was a hard time. And it really challenges you throughout the year. So excited for it.
I think it's exciting too that you and your brother really kind of represent maybe the next generation of what agriculture and young farmers look like. But Grant, before I let you go, we got to plug your socials, your game. Give us all your channels.
Yeah. So on Real Life YouTube channel, you can find me at Grant Hilbert on YouTube. If you're into gaming, the gaming channel is called The Squad. On Instagram, it's Grant Hilbert. And then Facebook, we have Hilbert Farms. And Instagram, we have Hilbert Farms also.
Awesome. So, well, thanks for sharing your story. It was great to have you on the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
Looking at a fertilizer update, some recent reports throughout the last week. Fertilizer prices are expected to remain elevated through 2028 as global conflicts, tight supplies, and disruptions in the Middle East continue to pressure the market. CoBank economist Jackie Fatka says prices have come down from the sharp increases seen earlier this year, but producers should still prepare for higher costs into 2027 and 2028. Farmers are increasingly using soil testing, precision nutrient management, and variable rate applications to control costs, with some cutting phosphates and potash applications by 10% to 15%. She says knowing your costs of production will be critical when deciding where to cut back and where to continue investing in fertility. When looking at fuel markets, they're also facing potential pressure heading into harvest with global inventories at historically low levels. The ongoing conflict involving Iran, disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz, has complicated that global oil flows, while some producers in the region are using alternative shipping methods to move supplies. Farm Marketing's Dave Chatterton says farm diesel prices could face additional pressure as seasonal demand increases. He recommends producers without on-farm storage or forward contracts secure their fuel they need as opportunities arise. But Delaney, what's happening in markets this week?
Well, Michelle, of course, last week was the WASDE report. We've got the Pro Farmer Crop Tour this week. So risk buying is supporting grain markets as analysts are now lowering their U.S. crop protections based on some of those results we've seen from the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, showing weaker corn yields and sharply lower soybean pod counts as well. Demand remains a key source of support here as China continues booking soybeans with another 136,000 metric tons of new crop soybeans, getting them closer to that commitment they have made here. And corn demand has slowed, but still remains above USDA expectation. On the livestock side of things, the cattle markets remain mixed this week with light cash trade, forcing packers to compete for supplies, supporting live cattle prices, but bids have been softer than previous weeks. And in wheat, declining global production estimates that we talked about earlier in the show and geopolitical risks are supporting wheat prices right now. But wheat harvest is in full swing, and that could continue to be a countervailing point there as we see that fight out against the production estimates. So the bulls and the bears fighting out there. We'll see who wins that one in the wheat complex. But that's a quick look at markets for this week. We'll be again at the Farm Progress Show here in just a few short weeks. So if you'll be around, shoot us a note at Ag News Daily on all the major social media platforms, and we can connect in person, maybe grab a quick interview with you for the podcast. Otherwise, just stop and say hi. But Michelle, what do you say for today? We'll let the people go.
Let's let them go.